Emmett Louis Till was a 14-year-old African-American boy who was abducted, tortured, and lynched in Mississippi in 1955, after being accused of offending a white woman, Carolyn Bryant, in her family's grocery store. The brutality of his murder and the fact that his killers were acquitted drew attention to the long history of violent persecution of African Americans in the United States. Till posthumously became an icon of the civil rights movement. Till was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. During summer vacation in August 1955, he was visiting relatives near Money, Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta region. He spoke to 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant, the white, married proprietor of a small grocery store there. Although what happened at the store is a matter of dispute, Till was accused of flirting with, touching, or whistling at Bryant. Till's interaction with Bryant, perhaps unwittingly, violated the unwritten code of behavior for a black male interacting with a white female in the Jim Crow-era South. Several nights after the incident in the store, Bryant's husband, Roy, and his half-brother J.W. Millam, who were armed, went to Till's great-uncle's house and abducted Emmett. They took him away, then beat and mutilated him before shooting him in the head and sinking his body in the Tallahatchie River. 3 days later, the boy's mutilated and bloated body was discovered and retrieved from the river. Till's body was returned to Chicago, where his mother insisted on a public funeral service with an open casket, which was held at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ. It was later said that the open coffin funeral held by Mamie Till Bradley exposed the world to more than her son Emmett Till's bloated, mutilated body. Her decision focused attention on not only U.S. racism and the barbarism of lynching, but also the limitations and vulnerabilities of American democracy. Tens of thousands attended his funeral or viewed his open casket, and images of his mutilated body were published in black-oriented magazines and newspapers, rallying popular black support and white sympathy across the U.S. Intense scrutiny was brought to bear on the lack of black civil rights in Mississippi, with newspapers around the U.S. critical of the state. Although local newspapers and law enforcement officials initially decried the violence against Till and called for justice, they responded to national criticism by defending Mississippians, temporarily giving support to the killers. In September 1955, an all-white jury found Bryant and Millam not guilty of Till's murder. Protected against double jeopardy, the two men publicly admitted in a 1956 interview with Look magazine that they had tortured and murdered the boy, selling the story of how they did it for $4,000. Till's murder was seen as a catalyst for the next phase of the civil rights movement. In December 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott began in Alabama and lasted more than a year, resulting eventually in a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that segregated buses were unconstitutional. According to historians, events surrounding Till's life and death continue to resonate. An Emmett Till Memorial Commission was established in the early 21st century. The Sumner County Courthouse was restored and includes the Emmett Till Interpretive Center. 51 sites in the Mississippi Delta are memorialized as associated with Till. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, an American law which makes lynching a federal hate crime, was signed into law on March 29, 2022 by President Joe Biden. Early life. Born Mamie Elizabeth Carthen on November 23, 1921 in Webb, Mississippi, she was a young child when her family relocated from the southern United States during the Great Migration, the period when millions of African Americans moved to the northern United States. In 1922, shortly after her birth, her father, Nash Carthen, moved to Argo, Illinois, near Chicago. There, he found work at the Argo Corn Products Refining Company. Alma Carthen joined her husband in January 1924, bringing along 2-year-old Mamie and her brother, John. They settled in a predominantly African American neighborhood in Argo. When Mamie was 13, her parents divorced. Devastated, she threw herself into her schoolwork and excelled in her studies. Alma had high hopes for her only daughter, and although Alma Carthan said that in her day the girls had one ambition to get married, she encouraged Mamie in her studies. Mamie was the first African American student to make the A honor roll and only the fourth African American student to graduate from the predominantly white Argo Community High School. At age 18, she met a young man from New Madrid, Missouri named Louis Till. Employed by the Argo Corn Company, he was an amateur boxer, who was popular with women. Her parents disapproved, thinking the charismatic Till was too sophisticated for their daughter. At her mother's insistence, she broke off their courtship. But the persistent Till won out, and they married on October 14, 1940. Both were 18 years old. Their only child, Emmett, was born 9 months later. They separated in 1942 after Mamie found out that he had been unfaithful. Louis later choked her close to unconsciousness, to which she responded by throwing scalding water at him. Eventually, she obtained a restraining order against him. After Louis violated this repeatedly, a judge forced him to choose between enlistment in the U.S. Army or jail time. Choosing the former, he joined the Army in 1943. In 1945, Ms. Till received notice from the War Department that, while serving in Italy, her husband was executed due to willful misconduct. Her attempts to learn more were comprehensively blocked by the United States Army bureaucracy. The full details of Louis Till's criminal charges and execution emerged only 10 years later. He had been charged with raping an Italian woman. Both men were tried and convicted by a U.S. Army General Court-Martial, and their sentence was death by hanging. Their sentence was appealed but denied. Both of their bodies were buried near the First World War U.S. cemetery located at Wazane in an area known as Plot E, or the Fifth Field. Later analysis of the trial by John Edgar Wideman would call Louis Till's guilt into question. By the early 1950s, Mamie and Emmett had moved to Chicago's South Side. Mamie met and married Pink Bradley, but they divorced 2 years later. Murder of Emmett Till. In 1955, when Emmett was 14, his mother put him on the train to spend the summer visiting his cousins in Money, Mississippi. She never saw him alive again. Her son was abducted and brutally murdered on August 28, 1955, after being accused of interacting inappropriately with a white woman. The following month, Roy Bryant and his half-brother J.W. Millam faced trial for Till's kidnapping and murder but were acquitted by the all-white jury after a 5-day trial and a 67-minute deliberation. One juror said if we hadn't stopped to drink pop, it wouldn't have taken that long. Only months later, in an interview with Look magazine in 1956, protected against double jeopardy, Bryant and Millam admitted to killing Emmett Till. For her son's funeral, Till insisted that the casket containing his body be left open, because, in her words, I wanted the world to see what they did to my baby. Tens of thousands of people viewed Emmett's body, and photographs circulated the country. Through the constant attention it received, the Till case became emblematic of the disparity of justice for blacks in the South. The NAACP asked Mamie Till to tour the country relating the events of her son's life, death, and the trial of his murderers. It was one of the more successful fundraising campaigns the NAACP had known. Activism. After her son's murder, it became quickly evident that Till Mobley was an effective public speaker. She enjoyed a close relationship with many African American media outlets, and the NAACP hired her to go on a speaking tour around the country and share her son's story. This was one of the most successful fundraising tours in NAACP history, though it was cut short by a business dispute with NAACP Executive Secretary Roy Wilkins over payment for her being on tour. Till Mobley continued speaking out, and in an effort to influence the jury during the trial of her son's murderers she flew to Mississippi and provided testimony. Till Mobley's activism extended far beyond what she did in the wake of her son's death. However, Since her Emmett's death became symbolic of the lynchings of the mid-1950s, she remains most well known in that context. For this, and all her activism, Till Mobley was able to use her role as a mother to relate to other people, and gain support for the cause of racial justice. A large part of her work and activism centered around education, as she advocated for children living in poverty for over 40 years, including 23 years teaching in the Chicago public school system. Ms. Till Mobley established the Emmett Till Players, a theater group that worked with school children outside of the classroom, learning and performing famous speeches by civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. to inspire hope, unity, and determination to their audiences. Later life and education. Till graduated from Chicago Teachers College in 1960. She married Gene Mobley on June 24, 1957. She became a teacher, changed her surname to Till Mobley, and continued her life as an activist working to educate people about what happened to her son. In 1976, she obtained a master's degree in educational administration from Loyola University Chicago. In 1992, Till Mobley had the opportunity to listen while Roy Bryant was interviewed about his involvement in her son's murder. With Bryant unaware that Till Mobley was listening, he asserted that Emmett Till had ruined his life. He expressed no remorse and stated, "Emmett Till is dead. I don't know why he can't just stay dead." Mamie and Gene Mobley remained happily married until Gene's death from a stroke on March 18, 2000. Death. On January 6, 2003, Till Mobley died of heart failure at the age of 81. Till Mobley was buried near her son in Burr Oak Cemetery, where her monument reads, "Her pain united a nation." Memoir. Till Mobley co-authored with Christopher Benson her memoir, Death of Innocence, the story of the hate crime that changed America, published by Random House in 2003, almost 50 years after the death of her son. She died a few months before the publication of her book. In popular culture, Whoopi Goldberg announced in 2015 plans for a film called Till, based on Till Mobley's book and her play, The Face of Emmett Till. Danielle Deadwyler played Till Mobley, with newcomer Jalen Hall as Emmett and Goldberg as Al McCarthan. The film was theatrically released on October 14, 2022. Till Mobley is portrayed by Adrienne Warren in the 6-part 2022 television drama Women of the Movement.